almost 6 decades ago. Yeah. A really varied background. Most of my experiences in the non-profit world, with the exception of 5 years I spent based in Austin, working in technology. I came back here in '98 to become the program director of WWOZ.
And what's your name, just so we say it sometime in the first 10 minutes? Because I made that mistake in the second one where I was like, oh, crap.
What's my name? I want to hear you pronounce it. No, Dwayne Breashears. But anyway, it was at WWOZ for 18 years. And prior to that, actually, I guess I need to back up a little bit. I started with the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, which produces Jazz Fest and does a lot of other things.
Sure.
Left, went to Texas, came back to OZ, which at that point in time was really just starting to take off. Before that, it was a little bit of one of the best kept secrets in New Orleans and the world. I mean, we didn't have social media back then, the very beginning, so not as many people knew about it. It was a little station over in Tremé, business office on the corner of St. Claude and St. Philip, and the studio itself was in the building in Armstrong Park, which is like a block apart, just going back and forth. And the first few years was all about getting it organized and bringing attention to the station itself. I said I didn't need to have children because I had like 120 of them to take care of at OZ. All the on-air talent, those are all volunteers.
Wow.
So.
And what was your role? What was the role that brought you back?
As program director.
What does that mean to a layperson?
That means helping to define the sound of the station, making sure that it's always on the air, that it's always staffed, that the people that are doing a jazz show are playing jazz or blues are playing blues. And at that point in time, I didn't have a music director, so I was also acting as music director too, contacting labels around the country to get music into the station so that we would have music to play.
Because you just have a block of time to fill. On air, there has to be something on it.
Yeah. Yeah, at that point in time, pre-Katrina, it was 24 hours of live talent on air. Someone was always on air.
Was that unique?
Volunteering. At that point in time, maybe not. These days, yes. I mean, it's not uncommon for a lot of stations to have pre-recorded music, pre-recorded hosts doing segments and dropping an hour, 2 hours, whatever. We had people that are on 2 to 3 hours, and on Friday nights, Midnight Creeper from midnight to 5 a.m. So if he couldn't do his show, it was a bit of a challenge to find somebody that would be willing to go on at midnight on a Friday night and stay till almost sunrise on a Saturday morning. But he loved it, and I think he's actually back on that slot right now.
No kidding.
Yeah. But that being said, post-Katrina, everything happened. People went to the four corners of the United States, and we wound up setting up the station in Baton Rouge at Louisiana Public Broadcasting and doing abbreviated shows there. And some people started driving in from wherever they were, whether it's Lafayette or Lake Charles or New Orleans even, and did their shows, abbreviated versions of their show. We came back to New Orleans December 2005 and set up over in the French Market Corporation. And
where it lives today.
Where it lives today. Yeah, it took some time to find a suitable space, but once we found that, it was like the near perfect location. So
you mentioned that your role was in some form defining the sound of the station. That's a creative director position.
I guess so, huh?
What is it? How do you even approach that? How do you decide what the sound is?
You know the genres of music, whether it's blues, jazz, traditional jazz, New Orleans sounds, which New Orleans music, which is not any one thing. I mean, it can be anything from gospel to brass to R&B. It just encompasses everything, rock even, which Ozzy doesn't play a lot of, but once in a while dabbles. But it's finding someone with a breadth of knowledge to share that music, that someone has that passion to talk about the music and play it.
Yeah.
A lot of the guys, women that are on the air will plan their shows for days in advance, sometimes weeks in advance. I actually had one on-air host, Judy Wood, that would actually keep track of every CD she played and every track that she played so that she would never repeat the same track ever.
You're kidding me.
She had little labels on every CD that she had. Like, I played this on July 17th, so I can't play that again for another who knows how many months, maybe even years. Some of them are very, very particular about, what they play and how often they play it. Others, not so much, but that's the beauty of it. You get diversity at the station.
That's it. How did you get into this? Because you'd mentioned, so you were doing something initially with the
Jazz
Jazz and
Fest.
Heritage Festival. I guess, could you take us to that? What links you in with
Let's
Jazz and
back up
Heritage?
a little further, okay.
We're just running the timeline backwards now.
I know, like back in time, like little Wayne's World. Actually, before all of that, I was working for an organization called the Volunteer and Information Agency, which is a United Way funded agency.
Okay.
First, finding volunteers for all the nonprofits in a 5-parish area. And then I switched over and became the information director for that organization, which is like the crisis line at that time. It became known as the COPE line.
The COPE line.
COPE line is what they called coping with life back then. Before everything, again, all your answers weren't available on the internet because the internet didn't exist back then. But anyway, one of the things that I did was to better understand the organizations that I was finding volunteers for, is I'd go out and visit a couple every week. And one of those was the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. And I just fell in love with it. It's like, I want to volunteer here, and would take my vacation time around Jazz Fest time to get out there and roll up tents and do whatever else needed to be done. And this is a bizarre story, but while out there, I saw people driving around in golf carts and said, well, what do you have to do to drive a golf cart? And they said, work here. I said, are you shitting me? It's like, I can do that. It's like, let me figure out what I want to do here, and I'll do it. And long story short, I went to work for OZ for a little while, for like 6 months after I left the Volunteer and Information Agency. A gig came up at Jazz Fest in the marketing and promotions department, and got the gig there, stayed there for 5 years, and the rest, as they say, is history. Left, came back, and just, it's a big family, as a matter of fact, with festival productions and Jazz Fest and everybody that's involved in it.
What draws you to this kind of stuff? Because everything that you've been affiliated with is so stinking New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that, Jazz Fest, OZ, are really cornerstones of New Orleans culture in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And you were getting involved with them in many ways at their inceptions.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I like finding things kind of, I guess, as they're being born, and wanting to be a part of it and make it better any way that I can, to bring it to the attention to those that really should know about it. I mean, OZ it's a jewel in the crown of the city. There's something that it is New Orleans. There's nothing else like it, I don't think, anywhere else in this country, if not the world. And that's, for me, it's always a challenge. It's getting something and being a part of and helping to shape it. I thrive on it. Once it becomes routine and I get bored with it, it's like I figure I know everything I need to know about it. It's like, okay, next,
Yeah.
And 18 years, I spent 18 years there.
That's an incredible amount of time.
It is like having a kid, sending it through high school, and saying, okay, I'm sending you away to college, you're on your own now, here's your allowance, goodbye.
What did it become over 18 years?
It became really a cultural icon, and so many people knew about it. It got to the point where we would go to conferences or broadcasts around the country and other parts of the world, and if we had like any OZ paraphernalia on, whether it was a T-shirt or a jacket or an umbrella, somebody would go, OZ, oh my God, I listened to you guys online. It's like, really? It was kind of humbling the first time it happened. I can tell you, it was like in San Diego for a radio conference out there. We like stopped somewhere to get a bite to eat, and I had a jacket on, and they saw it and just went gaga over it. So it was just kind of, again, humbling to know that we were part of something that was no longer just a part of New Orleans, but a part of the culture of the United States, if not the world. During our fund drives, we would, map out where the donations were coming from and realize that there really were people from all around the world listening to the station.
Yeah.
Religiously.
What facilitated that? Because I imagine when you start, you're not necessarily distributing through all these digital channels. When did that come about?
I would say it started 2002, 3, somewhere thereabouts, when streaming really, I guess, was really kicking in.
Mm-hmm.
And once social media became part of our being for all of us, it became so much easier to spread the word about OZ.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when Facebook started, I won't say it's the bane of my existence, but when Facebook started, I remember going into the office and telling everybody, it's like, guys, this social media thing is the future. We need to make sure that we're all a part of it and that we're spreading the word about the station. And now you just look at it and it's an animal. It can't be contained.
You can't avoid it.
No, you can't avoid it. And again, there are people from all around the world. We have I remember a listener in Germany that would always let us know if somebody was going off format, like if 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, because the time difference was one that, he was awake while the rest of us were asleep. And he's like, on Thursday at 4:30 a.m., so-and-so played blah, blah, blah. That's not jazz. I'm like, busted, dude, you're busted.
Why would somebody try to sneak something in just because they like a track?
Sometimes they just want to put that in there just to shake it up a little bit. It's kind of one of the cool things I like about OZ is that, again, they're all volunteers, they're passionate about it, and they don't always color inside the lines. Sometimes you just got to misbehave just a little bit to make sure people are paying attention. Or sometimes what they would do is weave music together and say, okay, maybe it's not that genre of music, but look at how that song, that musician influenced what this person is doing. And so if someone hadn't been paying attention to that 15, 20, 30 minutes of music and presentation, they would have missed out on what it was all about.
You see our mood lighting just hit.
Uh-oh, is that like Kmart shoppers?
That must have been an important thing that you said.
This is me, we're about to close.
Is that what the world loves about OZ? Is it the fact that, because having a volunteer-run station is crazy.
Yeah.
It's nuts. It's the same thing as saying, oh, we have a volunteer fire department. What? Like, you just signed up to do that?
Yes.
So that's incredibly special.
Yeah. Or when people say, I don't like that person anymore. I don't want to have my show next to them. It's like, okay, what do we do now?
Pay them more.
Pay them.
No.
They're volunteers, so you can't pay them much more than. Well, you could pay more, but that's a different story.
What do people see what are they looking for when they listen to OZ? Because would you say it has a cult following at this point?
Oh yeah, definitely. Again, I've been away 2.5 years.
Sure.
And I'm still called Dwayne from OZ, introduced like, this is Dwayne from OZ. It's like 2.5 years ago, but it still has that presence, that following. People are religious about it. I can hear my neighbors still behind me playing it on at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes. But it's part of the fabric of New Orleans. I'll never forget when we came back post-K looking for a place to call home, and people would see us in the streets, like Damon Jacob, our chief engineer, and David Friedman, who was the general manager at the time, wandering the streets, and they'd ask us, why we were, wandering around, and we'd tell them because they recognized us because we've been around so long.
Yeah.
But they would get so excited to see us and know that we were coming back because they missed hearing the music that's home. You can go anywhere else in the country and hear certain genres of music, the stuff that the top 40, I'm not going to name names of bands or anything like that, but things that you're going to hear always no matter where you are. But you can't go everywhere and hear brass or gospel or Cajun or Zydeco or the things that OZ plays. I mean, that is home. It's something that's associated with New Orleans and nowhere else. And that showed us how important it was to be back and to make sure that that culture continued. We were very active in getting musicians back into town and helping them find affordable housing.
How did you do that?
Fundraising. Networks, dude. Networks, phone calls, emails, calling politicians, whoever that we could think of.
Are there any
help.
success stories or particulars that you
Oh,
that come
I think
to
you
mind?
look at what happened, not us in particular, but you look at what happened with the Musicians Village, with the Marcelluses and Harry Connick Jr. coming together with other musicians and folks that were really concerned about the city and the culture, being a part of the creation of the New Orleans Musicians Village, a place that people who don't make or didn't make a lot of money had an opportunity to buy a home.
Yeah.
That they probably would never have been able to afford to be able to buy ever. So that was a way of making sure that some part of that community, of that part of our community, was able to get back into New Orleans and be a part of it. So, things that make you happy.
Do you see yourself in OZ nowadays? Little vestiges and snippets and ways things happen? Because 18 years, it's got to have your fingerprints all over it.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I don't think about it actively. In fact, I went back up there 2-3 weeks ago to help out with the fund drive, which is like the first time I visited a few times since I left, but it's the first time I was actively like being behind the scenes again and helping out even in a small way. And there are little bits that I can look around and say like, I was part of that and I did this, but the entire time I was there, I never looked at anything as like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. For me, it's always been about a team of people that were doing something special. Mm-hmm. These were people that I still say to this day, even though many of us left, we're still a family. You put us together and it's like no time has passed whatsoever.
Sure.
We're getting older, settling down, having kids and all that sort of stuff, but we keep up with each other. When you look at the fact that when you're working in any environment, you're spending more time awake with those people than anybody else in your life.
Yeah.
And so for us, it was very important to have that kind of family feeling at the station. And I think it's still there. I hope it's still there.
Sure.
But for the time that I was there, it was just an amazing opportunity, an amazing time in my life.
People throw these terms like culture and a family environment around all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think I didn't understand, like when I first got into the city, I've been here since 2011. People say, it's the culture, it's the culture, it's the culture. And it's like when you're explaining something to a little kid and they just are kind of looking at you glazed over. Mm-hmm. I was that little kid. Mm-hmm. It's the culture. I'm like, what are you talking? Like, what? I didn't really understand what was meant when people would say it's the culture of New Orleans is something important. Mm-hmm. How do you describe it? How do you share that? Do you think it can be, or do you think it's like,
I don't think you
just
can
jump
share it.
in?
You've got to jump in. You've got to live it. You've got to not question it and just be a part of it. I remember someone who joined the station from the Northwest who was very, I won't say upset, but questioning why second lines were never on schedule. It's like, well, why isn't this? It said 2:00. It's now 3:30. Where is everybody? It's like, it's just the way it is. We go with the flow here.
Yeah.
And again, you can't explain it. If you have to have it explained to you, maybe you shouldn't be here.
You missed the joke.
You missed the joke.
Yeah.
You'll always be on the outside looking in. It's like, in fact, we had a fundraiser with the Gulf Restoration Network the other night, and I met up with some friends. There are people I've known since I was in grammar school that are part of this. But the question for any New Orleanian really is, where'd you go to school? And it tells we were talking about how that just tells you almost everything you need to know and gives you that you find something you have in common there. It's like, whether it's the school you went to, the part of town that you grew up in, where you hung out, things like that, you find that commonality. And I think that may be part of the challenge for people who move here is not having that reference.
The deep history.
The deep history of it, where you can say, oh, I grew up here, and I used to ride my bike down Magazine Street when it was not as busy as it is now, or when, things were so different. I mean, just to look at how much the city has changed in the last 10 years is amazing.
What do you think about that?
The pros and cons. I love the fact that, parts of the city are thriving and that there's growth. The cons, I think, it's a little upsetting that we're seeing more and more gentrification, and it's become a much more expensive city to live in.
The cost have just jumped.
The cost of living here is astronomical. Because I remember back in the day, you could find a sweet apartment uptown, 1,000 square feet, safe neighborhood for $375.
Hook me up, man. Holy smokes. Yeah.
And I refer that to the place I had.
That sound in the background was our producer passing out.
Was that? Yeah, I had a sweet
having
space,
an aneurysm.
Humongous rooms with 12, 14-foot ceilings.
Mm-hmm.
For under $400 a month, like with a yard, washer, dryer,
Yeah.
and all that sort of stuff. And these days, if you can find it for $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, you're lucky.
Yeah.
So I think that's the most upsetting thing is that while the city is growing, it's not as affordable as it once was for people who work in music or in the arts or in the service industry or whatever. And that's something I was actually reading about yesterday, that they're finding that people who make the minimum wage sometimes have to work 2.5 full-time jobs to be able to live in a city like New Orleans or Washington, D.C. or Philadelphia or wherever else. It's like it's getting harder and harder for
It's that double-edged sword.
Right.
You don't want to become a victim of your own success.
Right.
Where you wind up choking out the things that make you special.
Right.
Which is a lot of the weirdness and the unplanned and the stuff that just goes.
Yeah.
It's hard to draw the line, it feels, in some sense. In one case, it's like, yes, I would like the sewage and water board to operate all the time.
Right.
I can deal with second lines being
Right.
late. Also, a second line shouldn't be.
It's
kind of hard to.
it's like
you try telling the party to keep moving.
Right. It's like when you start a party. If you say you're going to have a party on a Saturday night, you say 9 to get everybody there by 11.
That's it.
It's just kind of a given here. I don't know if it's universal, but here it's like you say, start it earlier to get everyone there when you really want them to.
If there was a primer, like a welcome to New Orleans kit that you could give to everyone that arrived in the city and said, this is the place that I'd like to be. I'd like to make this home. Mm-hmm. What would you put in it?
Oh my God. It's funny because actually I'd probably just give them a bunch of phone numbers. Say, these are the people you need to call and hang out with, and not so much give them places to go. And I think that's something that a bunch of us that have lived here for years, all of our lives, have discovered. I mean, once upon a time, Frenchman Street was the best kept secret in the city.
Yeah.
I mean, we still reminisce about how much fun it was to hang out on the corner by Cafe Brazil on Ade's car, listen to music in there, and then running over to the Blue Nile or Dream Palace or whatever it was that week and hanging out over there, and then running down the street to Snug Harbor for a minute or whatever. But it was always just a bunch of locals hanging out on the corner, not a bunch of tourists drinking things from big plastic containers or anything like that. It's just a bunch of locals hanging out. And I think that's one of the things that we look at now is trying to find places that are still New Orleans, but not infested by tourists. Not knocking tourists or tourism, because it's great for the city, but sometimes you just want something that's your own.
Yes.
And when you don't have that, you sort of kind of move on and try to find the next cool place.
I feel like you've lost your soul in a way if you don't have a little corridor, a little stretch that you can duck out.
Yeah, some place you can hang out and just be.
And that is the truth, because we do hospitality so well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like if you're at a little duck off spot, a little New Orleans only, like locals only type spot in the city, it does feel different from being in the side of New Orleans where it's kind of a performance.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, let's go to the Roosevelt and like get a drink at the Sazerac because that's a performance.
Right.
And that's a really sharp divide, and it's not knocking tourism because, like, hey, we do that really well.
That really right.
Like, check us out. But you do want something that you can have that's your own.
Right. And, you look at, I mean, we're just finishing up with Halloween season, which is like one of my favorite times of the year. And you've got Voodoo and Halloween New Orleans and so many big events going on around the city that people attend.
Mm-hmm.
And for me and a lot of the other locals, it's a lot more fun to find the parties that nobody else knows about.
Yeah.
And places where everybody isn't, taking a picture and sharing it on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. You're out there having a good time.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it too, is like a lot of times real New Orleanians are more about having the good times and taking the picture and like putting it out there for the world to see. We're too busy
being present
in the moments, like, oops, I should have taken more pictures. Oops, my eyes are kind of half closed on that one, And maybe that's part of it, I know you can look at that from all sorts of angles, I guess.
Whose numbers would you give out?
I'd give yours.
Not very interesting.
I don't
In
know.
bed by
It would
10, up at
depend.
6, they'd be very bored.
It's always if I have friends coming to town or acquaintances or someone's looking for recommendations, I always ask, what are you most interested in?
Sure.
Is it the food? Is it music? Is it going out and partying somewhere? What are you looking for?
Because it's all here.
It's all here. It's just finding the appropriate places for people.
Yeah.
And asking the right questions, like, is there anything that offends you?
Is that the first question?
Depends on the time of year.
Crew de Vue, we're not doing Crew de Vue then?
No Crew de Vue, no Mom's Ball, even though it's hard as hell to get tickets for Mom's Ball and a lot of other stuff. But, you have to talk to people and find out what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And New Orleans is a hard partying town. I mean, it's a 24-hour city.
Yeah.
Not everybody's used to that.
Yeah. It's easy to forget too, as if you're working and you're not always in it, or you don't work in hospitality. We went out to a dinner maybe 2 weeks ago at Dominica, and we got seated at like 8:30 and sat down. I was like, there's a ton of people here for a Wednesday. And then I was like, Robert, like, this is New Orleans. Like, you're in bed, tucked off somewhere in the 7th Ward. The city is still going.
The city is still going, right? Especially from this time until, Ash Wednesday.
That's it. It's all the spin up now.
It's all right. I mean, look at it, like, for all intents and purposes, Mardi Gras is going to be expanding now. Or Carnival, Mardi Gras. Carnival is going to be expanding. Like, the parades, some of those smaller parades that were happening during that Carnival period are going to move up a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
bonus weeks,
more king cake.
Where are we going?
More costumes. You need more costumes.
What's the story arc that you see? I mean, you're a lifelong resident. You're a New Orleanian through and through. You've been engaged with cultural icons in the city, Jazz and Heritage Fest, OZ. You've seen it from all the angles, really. And even now in your capacity, and you can tell a little bit about your job now, you've seen so many different versions of the city. And not even versions, just so many different colors in this broad stroke that's happening. Where do you see, what excites you about where we're going?
That it's exciting to me is knowing that it really has become a nonstop city. It used to be that you could say the busy season started in October and ended with Jazz Fest. I mean, you could almost map every event from, say, Voodoo and Halloween to Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve, 12th Night, Carnival, French Quarter Fest, Jazz Fest.
The roster.
Now it goes from Jazz Fest to, oh my God, Jared would kill me if I just went blank on the name. Anyway, we're there to about you and the Essence Fest and so many other things that are happening year round. There's something happening in the city year round. And it's just a matter of finding, as we used to say at OZ, get in where you fit in. And so where do you fit? Do you want to go nonstop 52 weeks a year? Or do you stop once in a while? It's like, I need to breathe for a minute and stay home.
Yeah.
You know, which a lot of friends do. It's like, they didn't even go to Halloween. It's like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. But I think that's part of it. It's exciting is showing that this isn't a city just limited to those celebrations, and that there's so many other things going on here. And I think a lot of that also happened post-K when a lot of new blood came into town and started some new traditions even.
What have you seen?
The creation of a lot more groups that are part of Carnival, a lot of new musicians that came here and became part of the fabric of the city. You know, there are a lot of musicians that couldn't come back. A lot came here that wanted to learn what New Orleans was all about, what the music scene was all about, and just really become a part of it. And again, it's one of those, like, I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'm not going to name names, but I just look at people who are big now that may not have even been here 15 years ago.
Sure.
And have become such a part of the city. And that's exciting to me to see that people move here and want to become a part of it and take the time to really become part of it. Others sometimes come, they want something instant, it doesn't work out for them, and they're gone a year later.
Yeah.
Like an Airbnb. I didn't say that out loud. Yeah, I did. But it's true. I mean, some people come here and they want it and they get it.
Yeah.
And some come here and they don't want to work for what it is, what it means to be a true New Orleanian.
People don't understand how much work it is.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. You know, sometimes you got to know that, you know, you're going to sacrifice your car to that big ass pothole on Canal Street.
That's the sacrifice?
It's a big sack. And you might say a couple of choice words when you hit it, like, yeah, whatever, it's in New Orleans, you know. And I think that's part of it too, is like learning to sometimes let go and not let things that might affect you if you live in LA or New York or Chicago or Atlanta, whatever, you just sometimes you go, yeah, you know, it's a city that care for God or forgot to care.
Yeah.
You know, life's too short sometimes to let what really oftentimes are little things get to you. And that's something you learn here. It's like we celebrate death. You know, we dance in the streets when somebody dies. You know, we celebrate life. You know, it's a big thing, learn to be happy.
It feels like folks are more and more looking for that. And here's the example of how you always see it. There's always a little group of guys or gals, bachelor party or bachelorette party, from I'll use where I grew up just because I can crap on it because it's where I grew up. North suburbs of Chicago, right? And you come down and you go, this is the place where I can relax. They go nuts, and 8 hours later, somebody's thrown up in the street, and you're like, oh my God. But people are so hungry for that, and I think you don't realize oftentimes. I remember, looking back on my slow adaptation, hearing you talk about don't fight it, go with the flow. There was no street throwing up, but there was so much me trying to be just like a Chicagoan in New Orleans, which doesn't work. No. It just doesn't work. I was just like, things have to get done. Here's sure, I gotta do this. And then once this happens, this thing will happen. Everything was clear. The trajectories worked. I had done all the mapping. I was like Da Vinci with all the designs. Nah. The more, it's like quicksand. The more I tried to fight it, the more stinking miserable I was. I was having no fun. And then the more I just said,
let go.
Let go, dude. Just bring the Midwestern niceness, but not all the clocks must run at this precise hour.
That's not how we operate here.
Yeah. And the city will eat you alive if you try to impose your will on it.
And spit you out. And leave you in the dust.
Needless to say, I've been humbled. Aggressively humbled, because I was very stubborn for a while.
So what was that moment that sort of ended that for you? That aggressiveness.
The give up moment.
Yeah.
You know what it was? When I first got into the city, I always feel like I came to New Orleans under false pretenses because I didn't understand what I was participating in, the meaning of it when I got here. So I came 2011 through Teach for America. And the message that was coming to everyone 2011 was, particularly in Teach for America, is you do this thing, and it's great. It's a couple-year commitment. You're going to be super, super valuable. You're going to be crazy helpful everywhere you go. People are going to fly the banners when you get out there. They're kind of bucking your head up, right? And as every other, liberal arts double major who goes, well, can I just extend my childhood for a little bit longer because I haven't actually dove into like the world of hard work yet? You take the bait. And so I wound up in New Orleans and proceeded to get my rear kicked, absolutely kicked. And then had to figure out very quickly, what am I doing here? What is this weird place? What am I being asked to do as an educator? What's the educational history that I'm participating in? And got really ticked off because I didn't like being a cog in the machine. And there were so many legitimate issues with both the educational system pre-Katrina, but also post-Katrina, the way in which quote-unquote recovery had been pursued. A lot of it was this very high-level pump-in cheap labor, and it led to a lot of really crappy things, this kind of bummer white saviorism of all these folks coming from all these universities all over the country saying, look at the great things we're doing. And I just thought it was kind of whack. I thought it was disrespectful to the place. I thought it was disrespectful to the people. I think showing up in a city with any kind of elitism or pretension about look how great we are, it's just really offensive. Because anywhere you go, first off, you're going to find buttheads anywhere you go. There are always goobers. Doesn't matter where in the U.S. There are goobers. And you're always going to find brilliant people. And it's like my mentor said, intellect, not dialect. He's from Monroe, Louisiana. Old school educator dude from New Orleans, or from Monroe. He said, Mr. Warren, it's intellect, it's not dialect. I was like, okay. But that was the switch. It was when I stopped fighting it. I stopped trying to manage external expectations. I quit trying to serve these different masters of, let me just appease the TFA thing and let me then appease the class thing and appease the school thing. And it hit a certain point where I said, screw this. I'm here to teach. I know I'm going to suck at it. The best I can do is make good on the commitment that I made, which is to work my face off. I can give 2 years to that. And went back for a third year because there was so much upset in the school. I didn't want to just kind of let students I had been working with for that many years just kind of say hey, see you guys. And
time's up, bye.
Just recognized it. Yeah. Just recognized this is not okay. I'm not okay with this. I still made a commitment. I have to make good on it. And to do it the right kind of way, I have to reorient the way that I'm thinking about the programming. And that means that I can recognize it for what it is and what it isn't. But I just have to be honest with it. I can't force it. And when I stopped trying to force it and I just started calling things out and saying, that's not cool. That's not cool either. Also sit down, read. Just do your reading. But no, this is what we do here. This is English class.
Which school were you teaching at?
I was over on the West Bank at LB Landry. So right when it came back post-Katrina, I was there its second and third year of existence. And then I was there when it merged with Oprah Walker.
So you got your stripes then.
Oh, yeah.
You earned them.
You're one of the few people who and people go, what happened? I go, yeah, that happened. My second week of school, I was unloading a handgun on the front lawn of the school.
Did you keep it?
They didn't let me, unfortunately. But it's one of these things where it's I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, dude. I was the greenest. Just the greenest. Just imagine me in my nice little button up, fresh out of college. I'm going to go teach English.
This wasn't covered in the curriculum? Exactly.
And, I had to learn pretty quickly. And there's that's the thing, is there's some amazing educators in the city.
Yes, there are.
Insanely good educators. And they have spent their careers working in a system that has fundamentally fought against them. And when it came back post-Katrina, didn't pay them the respect that they were earned. Now, that being said, there were some educators in the city who were riding coattails, who weren't doing the things they should have done. And if there's one huge error I think that was made, one really glaring error, is that there was not enough care given to the value of legacy educators. And it's so much more than just like the cost of your math teacher who has been there 15 years and the pension. It's so much more important than that. Like having teachers as cornerstones of neighborhoods, of families in some ways. Oh, you taught my aunt.
Yeah.
Oh, you taught my mom.
Yeah.
Okay, there's something about that wasn't, I think, not addressed in the right way. And I think that was a big injury. Just not having the care to really understand and how to parse in that way.
Well, it's interesting as you talk about that. I'm thinking one of the things that makes New Orleans too is it's a city. It was like what 300, 400,000 people here. But in many ways, it's a small town because we only have 1 degree of separation here.
Yep.
That's it. You know, as a friend of mine I used to work with at Festival Productions passed away last week, and I was reading his obituary this morning and going, I didn't know he was related to this one and that one and this one and that one, just the way it's all tied together here in the city, that we have that very, very small level of separation amongst us all.
Yeah.
You know, even if you're wealthy or middle class or even, you know, not wealthy at all, you still can almost always say, oh, I know that person, I know that person through this one. And that's one of the things that makes New Orleans unique. Just circling back to what we were talking about earlier.
You don't get it anywhere else?
I don't think so. I mean, are you going to be able to do that in Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or
humans become
Atlanta?
Recyclable.
You become just another brick in the wall.
That's it.
You know, you're just another brick in the wall. Whereas here, you are. We don't build walls here, but you're part of the fabric. You're part of the thread of whatever the tapestry of the city. You know, you're part of it.
It's funny because hearing you talk about that, it makes me think of hearing my friends' experiences using like Tinder and Bumble in New York in particular. And there's this just bizarre behavior that is fueled when your city is massive, there's no consequences to being rude to somebody, and there's enough social circles that the way that you behave could be totally invisible to anyone except for yourself. And in New Orleans, you just can't do that. You can't do that.
No. We'll dish you in like 10 seconds. How long does it take to put that out there on Facebook or Instagram, whatever, like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, done.
Somebody knows somebody who knows somebody.
Somebody knows exactly. But we're not mean like that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's a small town.
It's a small town. You got to cover it. But.
Where do we go next?
Where do we go next? I don't know. Where you want to go?
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, where does the city go next?
Good question. I'd say let's deal with some of the internal problems that we have here. Crime, education. I mean, one of the reasons I left back in the 90s is because I thought it's dirty, it's crime-ridden, education here sucks. But I think we're a great city already. We have the potential to be like I can't even think of a word to describe it. But I think with people like yourself and others that are coming in here, and others in my age that are saying, you know what, we need to stop and take care of our own for a little bit and start addressing the problems here. And I think that's one of the things that will help the city take that next step and say we truly are so different. We're setting the bar higher for every other city to take care of itself and take care of its own. I'm finding more and more people that have worked 15, 20 years in a field saying, you know what, I've done this, it's time to stop, it's time to give something back. A friend of mine who's been a medical professional for 20 years just announced the other day, she's like, you know what, I'm giving it up, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I know there's more to life than this, and I want to give something back to the world. And I think that's part of what we're seeing here in the city, more and more people that care enough to get involved in the community to try to solve problems. Like you see kids in neighborhoods that don't have bikes. I mean, I've had a lot of friends post on Facebook or other social media. It's like, does anybody have a spare bike or like something that's just sitting there that
How to
you don't
take
know
care
to
of
get-
each other.
Yeah, it's like take care of each other, you know, and I think that's part of it, showing the world that, you know, you can care about other people and not just yourself, and let the selfishness go that what we, I guess, adopted back in the 80s and 90s when people became so much more selfish, and it's like me, and it's like, no, not me, it's more about we.
It's time to bring the care back.
Bring the care back.
Man,
Exactly.
I think that's a great place to leave it. We've run a full 46 minutes.
Have we really?
We've cruised. Yeah. Man, I appreciate you. It's really a pleasure to have you and just to learn so much more about you.